All right, hello everybody. This is Dr. David coming to you guys from the Wellness Way in Coralville. This is probably a replay that you guys are watching, but tonight we are talking about the Wellness Way's approach to autoimmune. The body doesn't make a mistake. Now, autoimmune conditions are always on the rise. Now, for many of you guys, you may have found this video just by searching on YouTube. You guys may have this may be a recording from a webinar, or maybe you are becoming a new patient with us. But ultimately, what I want you to take from this message is just the understanding of how we look at the body, especially from an autoimmune perspective. Because what you'll find is that for many, we have a very different perspective on what we do here. But ultimately, it helps our patients get the results that many times they've been lacking in, which is the result or a plan for their health moving forward. Now, for you guys that do not know, my name is Dr. David. Now, why am I talking about this? Well, I want to speak to one of my family members here. So as you can see, I have 4 sisters. I know, bless my soul here, but I'm going to speak to the one that's standing right next to me here. This is Sophie. Now, Sophie struggled immensely, specifically with cystic acne, fatigue, some OCD tendencies, and other just health concerns that she had. Now, for her, she was struggling for many years, honestly, and she ended up getting diagnosed with PCOS. PCOS stands for polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now, she had very prolonged cycles, very painful cycles, and it wasn't until we were able to test her body where she was able to find some results. Now, when we tested her, when we first had some interactions with her, she had cystic acne that she was very much struggling with. Now, one of the things that we did when we tested her is we made sure we understood what her body was telling us. And what we found out that she was actually diagnosed with autoimmune thyroid, or Hashimoto, as many people will know. And so there's a huge different approach, not only with the hormonal balance like PCOS, but also an autoimmune process, which is what we walk our patients through and how they can find relief. Because for her, she now has very clear, happy skin, which is fantastic, and it is something that changed her life because she's 22 years old today, but when this specifically was happening in 2020 and 2021, she was struggling. Now, granted, we were during COVID and lockdowns, but she was still, anytime you have cystic acne on your face and your body, that can be something that's psychologically draining, but also with some of the other symptoms, very painful. And so for her, we're going to be talking a little bit more about how we approach this tonight. For her, struggling with Hashimoto's, but for others, it's rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, psoriasis, all these other conditions where we really have to begin getting to the bottom of. Now, ultimately, the goal of this presentation is to get you guys to do one thing and one thing alone. It's to think a little bit differently, because I always ask the question, do I have more doctors, nurses, hospitals than ever in history? More. Do I have more or less cancer associations, pink ribbon associations, drives for all these conditions? More. Well, then why is heart disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and all these other conditions continue to go up, 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 and up, right? We may be living longer, but what's that quality of life like? And so we need to take a different perspective. So if the bare minimum, if I can get you guys to think a little bit differently, then I will have done my job tonight. So now a lot of people will ask the question, well, okay, so you guys are alternative medicine, functional medicine, you guys are trying to take over medicine, like what is it that you guys are doing? And so we love analogies here. Analogies help give us a nice understanding of who we are and how we think about differently. So I want you guys to look at this picture and see that this house is on fire. Let's imagine that you are on your way home right now and you see this is on fire. Who's the first professional that you're ultimately going to call, right? The first person you're probably going to call is a fireman. Now, firemen are coming with their 2 tools, their axe and their hose. First group of guys going to run in to knock down all the doors, the walls, the windows, to make way for their buddies with their hoses to spray down everything in sight. Now, once the fire is put out, we all stand there what? Grateful. Grateful because the fire is put out. But what are we left with? Well, we're left with this. A house that's a little burnt, rotten, toxic, and kind of hard to live in, right? So you ask the fireman, hey, guys, can you come back tomorrow and help me rebuild this house? And they say, that's actually not our job. Our job is just put the fire out. So in this case, now you need to call the next professional because obviously you can't live in this house. And in this case, you need to call the carpenter. Carpenter is going to come in with all of its raw materials, all of its tools, its lumber to bring in to rebuild the house. But more importantly, they ask the question of, why did this fire start in the first place, right? Now, if we think about our bodies as that burning house, and you could think about that from lupus to rheumatoid arthritis to Hashimoto's or Graves', you can consider all these different autoimmune processes, and we think about emergency medicine and what it is that they do. And I'm going to see if I can actually just draw on this. Oh, look at that. We think about emergency medicine as the firemen. They also have their two tools as well: drugs, medications, and surgery, right? Now, let me ask you a question, though. Can you rebuild this house with an axe and a hose? Right? Most people don't think they can. So why do we expect to rebuild our bodies with a medication or a surgery, right? Now, let me back up. Let's say that I have a heart attack. I don't want these carpenter doctors necessarily working on me. I want the firemen. I want them to give me the whatever medications or surgeries, different things that they need in order to keep me alive. That's what I want. But is that medication, is that surgery good for the person? It's not necessarily good. But does it save their life? Absolutely. And that's why we always say there is a time and a place. But when we talk about these chronic conditions, we have to come from this carpenter perspective, because we always ask the question, okay, well, why is your body responding this way in the first place? Why is your body attacking itself? Which is what we're going to get into now today. So, autoimmune disease. It's the leading cause of death among young and middle-aged women in the United States. I will say one of the more common conditions that I take care of and help support the body with is Hashimoto's. And many women present, and they're absolutely struggling, whether it be through chronic fatigue, joint pain, hair thinning, and it's a struggle. Now, there's also patients who are struggling with that rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, Hashimoto's, and all these other conditions, but ultimately this is a problem that more and more women are struggling with, and we need to begin to getting to the bottom of, right? But now let's walk through this. Let's walk through our thought process and how we look at the body through this lens. So the Autoimmune Association, what is autoimmunity? Now I'm going to read through this and we're going to break this down. One of the functions of the immune system is to protect the body by responding to invading microorganisms such as viruses and bacteria by producing antibodies or sensitized lymphocytes. Completely agree with that, 100%. If you get exposed to a pathogen, your body's immune system, lymphocytes are just a specific type of immune cell, which we'll talk more about in just a bit, that are going to make sure that that bugger does not do any harm to the body. Your immune system is very smart. It does exactly what it needs to do to keep you alive, okay? So let's continue on. Under normal conditions, an immune response cannot be triggered against the cells of its own body. Completely agree. Your body knows the difference between self and non-self. And so in this case, we need to understand that it's not going to just attack your body, okay? Now, in certain cases, however, this is where it gets a little iffy. Immune cells make a mistake and attack the very cells that are meant to protect. Guys, this is one of the biggest differences between the way that the firemen and the carpenters think. Your body's not making a mistake here, but they believe that it is. They say this is what it leads to many different autoimmune diseases. Because here's what I'm going to say. Your body is definitely under stress. We understand that. But is it attacking normal cells? Or is there something that we're missing? And that's what we're going to continue walking through. Because we talk about autoimmune diseases, again, we have that see that there's 80 types at least of autoimmune diseases that we know about. But they even say too, your body's immune system attacks healthy cells of your body by mistake. Autoimmune diseases affect many different parts of their body, right? And now they even say that they do tend to run in families. Women, particularly African American, Hispanic American, and Native Americans, have higher risk. Okay, so we have more of a population here. Well, this is what Medline Plus says. Now, if we keep going through, though, let's talk about the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, right? Now, what do they say is going on with these autoimmune conditions? Well, they say that most of the time it's largely unknown why it happens. It's just your body decides to attack itself one day. So they go on and say studies indicate that diseases likely result from an interaction between genetic and environmental factors. What does that mean, guys? What does that mean? Because that's what they say for everything, right? Heart disease, okay? There's probably some form of genetic and environmental risk factors, okay? Let's go back to PCOS. Well, there's probably some genetic and environmental risk factors, okay? Well, what does that mean, though, right? Because environmental risk factors, so there's something in the environment that we're exposed to. Genetics, well, we talk about genes, we talk about autoimmune diseases arising, but we talk about the this Virginia lad here, the president and executive director of the Autoimmune Related Disease Association, says, with a rapid increase in autoimmune diseases, it clearly suggests that environmental factors are at play due to significant increase in these diseases. Genes do not change in such a short period of time. Guys, our genetic code, we always evolve. We always evolve over time, but our genes don't, it takes a lot for our genes to change, or decades to change. Epigenetics, which is a whole nother topic, those can change based off your environment. But again, then we come back to this idea of, okay, well, what's going on with the environment? Not necessarily your genes. So what does this all to say? Your body's not genetically programmed for disease. Your body's genetically programmed for health. And so if genes aren't the culprit, we have to really understand what's going on, because then we get into, okay, well, what are autoimmune conditions? Let's talk about WebMD. WebMD is one of the most heavily searched web browsers to find what's going on with this autoimmune process going on. So, I mean, what's next here? We talk about how immune system disorders cause abnormal low activity or overactivity of the immune system. Okay, well, okay, that's basically the same trend we've been hearing. Second line here, in response to an unknown trigger, the immune system may start producing antibodies that, instead of fighting infection, attacks the own body tissue. So we sit over here and we're like, okay, so your body's just deciding one day to attack itself. Their genes, okay, well, maybe. And then we talk about treatments. Okay, well, rheumatoid arthritis. Now, there's a lot of stuff on here, and this is where we talk about with the treatments here, though. You know, rheumatoid arthritis, we see that there's oral and injectable medications. Okay, well, lupus here, there's oral prednisone or steroids that you can do. IBD, irritable bowel disease, again, oral and injected immune cell medications. Okay, well, MS, let's talk about MS. Various medications can be used to treat MS. You know, we can go on and on and on here, but again, we're coming back from that perspective here of we're using that hose to spray down that burning house, right? Because here's what I'm going to say though about that. Imagine that this is the treatment. I have patients who these medications save their life. It gives them relief throughout the day. It gives them hope that they can heal and get better for some time. And then they start to wear off, and then the dose needs to go up and then up. And it needs to be changed because your body's not responding to it anymore. So let's go back to that fireman and carpenter analogy. You may not have another fire. You may not necessarily be responding super, super strong maybe to it anymore, but what are you doing to your house every day? You basically have a hose every single day, and you're standing outside spraying it down for how long? The rest of your life. Now, you may not have another fire, but what are you left with? A rotting house. Because especially with a lot of these medications, you may have a less symptomatology, but what does that mean as a side effect, right? Because what are some of the side effects of those medications? I don't encourage you to look at them. Because a lot of the times when you lower that immune response, you can leave you susceptible to other things. But here's the treatment options for many of these things, because then let's continue on. So what are they saying? What are they saying? The immune system has made a mistake, okay? So your body is making a mistake and it's attacking itself, okay? There's genetic factors, okay? Well, maybe not so much, but let's just roll with what they say. Women are most susceptible, okay? But we still don't really know what's going on. Okay, so we don't really know. There might be environmental factors. Okay, well, where are those? What are those, right? Now, nothing can be done except for medication the rest of your life. And this is something that we commonly hear as well, as labs do not change. Once you have this, you basically have this forever, right? Now, there was something that hit us, though. It hit me when we started diving into this, and we came from that carpenter approach. They missed a key phrase in here. In response to an unknown trigger. Let's sit on that for a second. In response. This next statement, if you're struggling or you know somebody struggling with an autoimmune condition, will change your life. The body does not make a mistake. It always responds. It responds to the stress placed on it. It responds to the environment that it's put in. It always responds. That's where we talk about our second key analogy here of the Swiss watch principle. Because ultimately, we have to understand that your body responds to the stress placed on it, and it can affect every single gear within our Swiss watch. Now, to back up here, what is a Swiss watch? It's a little pocket watch Flip it on the back side. There's many gears. Some are big, some are small, some move fast, and some move slow, but they all work to make the time accurate. And if one gear gets ticked off, then it will affect the entire clock, and the clock may not be accurate. Same thing with our bodies. For example, one of the most common symptoms that we'll see is that there's somebody with, say, rheumatoid arthritis, constant joint pain. Could be concerned with their immune response, absolutely. But what if there's a GI concern, right? What if there's something going on with the environmental triggers surrounding us where it actually could affect our respiratory system and we're susceptible to mold toxicity, which is expressed throughout our entire body? Did you guys know that your big toe actually controls your heart? Don't believe me? If I smash your big toe, what's going to happen to your heart rate? Cholesterol? Blood pressure? It's all going to go up. Now, do I need to give you turmeric, or do you need to go get a statin or high blood pressure medication, or do I need to get off your dang toe? Right? It's asking the question from a carpenter perspective, saying, hey, which gear, what stress is on the body that's keeping you from your health, right? Because when we talk about in response to something, what could you be responding to? Well, this is just a basic list of what we always want to test for. Food allergies, infections. Pregnancy can be a stress in its own right, 100%. Mental stress, inflammation, mold, deficiencies. Deficiencies are a huge one that many people always overlook. Immune barriers are down. Vaccines, physical trauma, viruses. Guys, what if I told you that your autoimmune response right now is keeping you alive? Let me ponder on that for a second. Because their little virus that gets into the thyroid, and your immune system says, hey, I'm going to attack the thyroid in order to keep you alive so it doesn't attack your liver or your pancreas or your GI or your brain. Because what's one thing that commonly happens for people with autoimmune conditions? They'll develop a second one, develop a third one. It's very, very common. But is that because your body's making a mistake? Or because your body is smart and saying, I'm trying to keep you alive, right? Again, it's a different perspective, but that's what we're here to present to you guys today. But what is your body responding to, and what can you do about it? Because let's get back into the autoimmune diseases. This is from the womenshealth.gov website. We know that there is an autoantibody, 100%. Now, at the same time, a special cell called a regulatory T cell fails to do its job of keeping the immune system in line. So this regulatory T cell, okay, what is this guy? Well, let's talk about this. In the research that they have out there, human regulatory T cells in autoimmune diseases, it plays a critical role in the preventing of autoimmunity, and their failure contributes to autoimmune diseases. Now, guys, this is a lot of wording. I like pictures, okay? We're going to go with pictures here. So let's say you have this virus, this bug, this thing, or we can say gluten for people with celiac. Celiac is one of the only autoimmune responses or autoimmune conditions where we have a known trigger for that condition. If you have celiac disease, you cannot eat gluten. Otherwise, your immune system will be fired up, right? So we talk about this barrier. So let's say that you have this gluten if you're celiac, or you can present this with a virus, bacteria, toxin. You have this guy called the macrophage, which is over here saying, hey, this is not supposed to be here, and it does its best to ward it off, right? So gets to the invader. Then we continue on here, and we get this guy called a T helper cell, which basically is over here saying, okay, I'm going to call in some help. We're going to get some help. Okay, so natural killer cells, cytotox T cells. These guys are you guys with all the guns. If you're in war, these are the guys with the guns over here trying to help fight off that infection, right? Now we also get some B cells. Now these are what many people respond to as antibodies. So when you get a vaccine, people will always want to produce antibodies. But guys, look at all these processes that have to happen. This has to happen, this has to happen, this has to happen, this has to happen before we even get to antibodies, which is why vaccines have been associated with triggering autoimmune responses. But now we get to this regulatory T cell, okay? Now this regulatory T cell is the big guy up in the booth at going to war here, and basically says, we need to mount this response? Do we need to downregulate this response? Okay, now T suppressor cells. T suppressor cells, your T regulatory cells come and say, hey, suppressor cells, let's get this immune response under control. However, this is the analogy I always give to my patients. I want you to imagine that you have a bruised wrist, and every single day you just came in here and kept slapping it every single day. You continue to be bruised, you continue to be inflamed, and you cannot heal. At some point, your body or your T regulatory cell basically says, hey, I'm getting beat up so much that I just am so tired I cannot function. And your immune system is over here saying, guys, this is still responding. Keep going to keep us alive. Okay? Your body is responding to those stressors. Because if you keep having this gluten, if you're celiac, if you keep eating that gluten, your body's saying, okay, keep slapping myself. I can't heal. So I just have to keep mounting this immune response until the point of I'm now experiencing this severe GI pain. I'm experiencing this absolutely severe debilitating headaches, joint pain, systemic inflammation that so many of you guys probably know and listen to hearing this, right? So we can consider this from gluten because celiac is the one that we know about, but what else could be triggering our bodies? Well, let's consider allergies. Allergies can be occurred when the immune system reacts to a foreign substance such as pollen, bee venom, and pet dander, or food that doesn't cause a reaction in most people, right? We all may know somebody, or we know that there's an incidence of peanut-free sections because so many people have allergies to peanuts where they need an EpiPen, right? But how can we stop slapping our wrist? What are some ways that we can stop slapping the wrist so we don't have to be exposed to this? Because quite frankly, many of us, we live where we live, and pollen, there's always a pollen season or pet dander that we're always exposed to. So how can we downgrade our burden? Well, one of the most common tests that I like to run on some of my patients is our food allergy test. Now, while I just talked about that peanut allergy, there's also other reactions which we call IgGs, which again is that simple reaction that there's just common foods that are not going to immediately kill you, but they cause reactions in our bodies. And so this is one of the most basic tests that I run on just about anybody because quite frankly, I don't know one person who does not eat food. And quite frankly, foods can be inflammatory to our body if we don't know what's causing the stress, right? Now, this is a patient who was struggling with psoriasis, just the skin, her skin was just inflamed, to say the least. And we tested her body for the food that she was eating, and let's consider some of the ones that she had. Big oatmeal fan. Also had a brewer's yeast allergy. Loved drinking her wine. Loved having wine every single day. And but amongst other things, cow's milk is a very common one. Eggs is a very common one. All these things can be causing that inflammatory stress for her. And over time, we had to remove these things. And amongst other things that we had to work on with her, the response started going down. And her body started healing the way that it was supposed to by removing that layer of inflammation. But let's also talk about another one. Let's talk about mental stress. Ladies, you guys can do absolutely everything right. You guys can avoid your food allergies. You guys can get adjusted. You guys get a perfect night's sleep. But mental stress will still hurt you guys more than anything else. Now, men do as well, but ladies, you guys are very much more apt to stress response for this simple reason, which we're going to go through right now. So you and I all, whoever's watching this, has these hormones, right? All of us have progesterone. All of us have testosterone. All of us have estrogens. Estrogen is not a hormone, which is a whole other video that we will go through. But when we talk about these hormones, our stress response can keep us sick, is the short answer, because there's this hormone called cortisol right here. Cortisol is our stress hormone. Now, we need a certain amount of cortisol throughout the day, but when we're bombarded by mental stress, that's a bad day, because as we move forward with this, we talk about our stress pathway. When your body is under stress, it does not care about reproductive hormones. Progesterone will be depleted because of our acute stress or from our chronic stress response. For men, the reason why men don't do as bad with stress from a physiological standpoint is because the one hormone that we ultimately really care about is over here, testosterone. And we need progesterone, but not to the extent that ladies, you guys do. And so if we deplete progesterone, that leaves us susceptible to immune response issues, and it also keeps our stress response super high, which could put us in a breakdown state, not a building state, which leaves us susceptible to autoimmunity. Take this patient who came in. She's a CEO of a company. She is a CEO of a company. And I had a hard conversation with her saying, hey, you have a very, very high cortisol pattern, especially in the morning, especially at night. She's basically in a fight or flight response most of the day. And even when she is within range, she's at that red line of it, right? But how many of you guys had your cortisol rhythm checked to say, hey, am I stressed? Am I to the point where this is a stress response, right? Mental stress is an absolute huge one. But let's talk about deficiencies. Deficiencies in nutrients is a huge one. Now, vitamin D is one of the most common that we see. Low levels of vitamin D has been associated with an autoimmune thyroid disease, Hashimoto's, and Graves. Impaired vitamin D signaling has been reported to encourage thyroid tumorigenesis. So the generation of thyroid cancers and tumors. Guys, you need good, healthy levels of vitamin D. And for many of us in the northern hemisphere, where maybe especially in the wintertime, which is when this webinar is being recorded, we just don't get it, the amount of sunlight that we need to. And we all know those people who are not exposed to sunlight. They go down to Florida or on vacation and they come back a brand new person. A lot of times it's because of vitamin D, right? Vitamin D is super crucial to our health, and we can go on even further. Vitamin D, there is now increasing interest in repurposing vitamin D to downregulate pathological immune response in patients with autoimmune inflammatory conditions. High levels of vitamin D may induce many different anti-inflammatory functions, including increasing the number and or function of regulatory T cells. Guys, I test a lot of people's vitamin D levels. 90% of them are on the low side. 90% at least. And I will say that those with autoimmune responses, you need to have higher levels of vitamin D. You do. Because of that support that it offers your immune response. Okay? Now, vitamin D is one. What about B vitamins? B vitamins are another huge one which gets depleted with stress. Also, any form of medications like birth control, as well as stomach-lowering medications if you're dealing with acid reflux or GERD or something like that, causes many, many deficiencies. Something to keep in mind. But also things like magnesium, iron and ferritin can also be super crucial, but nobody's addressing these things. Again, it's this carpenter mindset saying, what is your body lacking in, or what is the stress that's causing these responses? Because we know that these are all connected. But this is where you can't look at the body as a one narrow machine. There's many different gears that work together. And you can't just say one thing to fix everything. You can't just give this or that. I can give you turmeric, but it's not going to solve the problem without digging deeper. But you need a carpenter doctor who asks the question of why is this happening, and not just leaving it up to it's genes, or maybe there's an environmental trigger. But it's mostly, it's just your body's making a mistake. That's all. You can't do anything about it besides, here, take this. No, guys, your body is responding, and your body has an opportunity to heal once you give it the proper support it needs. Then we talk about the gut. Now, guys, the gut is a buzzword everywhere you go these days. Take a probiotic, don't take a probiotic, prebiotics, take this new supplement, try this cleanse, different things like that, guys. Test the body, please, 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 because we know that the immune system is a majority of it's in your gut. But we know that IgA is facilitated by a particular regulatory T cell. What the heck is IgA? Guys, here's the simplest analogy I can give for you. A reflection of your IgA in your mucosal immune system. Take a little mucus out of your mouth. You have a mucus lining from your mouth down to your bottom. That is a lot of where your immune system is held. Okay? So when we talk about your immune response and your GI, you need to know and understand what is going on as an immune response. And this is the simple analogy that we like to give. So you have this mucosal layer right here. When there's a bugger or a virus, bacteria, or let's keep up with the gluten for celiac disease to make it simple, your body says, you're not supposed to be here, and you can begin starting to get inflammation on this GI lining, which can ultimately lead to what? Leaky gut, if you've heard of leaky gut. Also, food allergies, impaired systemic inflammation, which can all be a leader to autoimmune disease. Now, there's a lot more to this, and I'm keeping this very basic for this webinar, but understanding here that you need to understand how your GI is functioning. And just because you don't have acid reflux does not mean your GI is not inflamed. But you can test for this. You can test for this. Right here, we see that this is our stool test, and you can see this fecal secretory IgA. You can test for the amount of inflammation that you have here. This is one of my patients who's struggling with rheumatoid arthritis. Severely inflamed, okay? And when we took it a step further, it's always asking the question, well, why is it inflamed? Well, we can see here we've got a lot of bacteria that's beginning to overgrow, okay? We also have some yeast species that are beginning to overgrow in the gut, which can lead to that systemic inflammation, right? Now, over time, we can begin bringing down that inflammatory response by supporting the body properly and looking to heal the way that you're supposed to. But again, how many people go through that investigative process to find the answers that they need? Not many. Because let's talk about Hashimoto's now. This is one of my patients who we're just now getting some updated labs back, struggling tremendously with sleep apnea. I guess we're doing a check mark sign over here. Sleep apnea being a big one. Also constant fatigue. She's a single mom who works most of the day. Now, she came in also, another thing where her biggest concern was actually her elevated cholesterol. So we ran some markers on her. We ran a full panels on her to make sure we had a good picture of what's going on. And she didn't realize that she had an autoimmune thyroid or Hashimoto's response going on here. She didn't know. She didn't know because all that was told to her was that diet doesn't matter, her lifestyle doesn't matter. Just take this and you'll be fine. Well, for her, big viral component here. Amongst other things, she had some blood sugar concerns as well. We also were struggling with other dietary things as well. But there's an Epstein-Barr infection. There's a viral component here. Over time, this is over a couple months, we had some updates on her markers, and you can see here that had quite the improvements. And we're not done yet. Now, here's the thing I always want to say, though. I'm doing nothing for her. I'm guiding her along her journey to show her how she can keep this in check, right? Because her body is strong and it's now healing. It's able to heal because she's removing the stress placed on it, right? We still got some work to do. Don't get me wrong. I see that number. We still got some work to do. But over a couple months, we were able to make tremendous progress, which is fantastic. And one final case, this is another kiddo that I was working with, specifically struggling with alopecia. Now, when he presented to me, his mom came in, and she was almost in tears, just because she said that, we've gone to so many doctors, we're about to take him to Mayo Clinic, either that or they're going to have to just start giving him corticosteroids. This kid's 6 years old. She also said that her I believe it was her mom or her sister-in-law or something like that, does more of the natural stuff. And she brought in a knapsack and literally poured out, and I'm not exaggerating here, 18 bottles of supplements. And she's like, is any of this stuff even worth taking? And I'm like, I don't know, right? So doing what we do, we tested the body. Now, we started with some labs. He had multiple anaphylactic allergies, actually, so we told him to start getting rid of those, which takes time, but we started working on those. Ran our stool test. Yeah, there's a few things off in there. It wasn't a terrible test, but we started getting things better. But there's still something we were missing. And I was like, there was a marker on some of his blood work. I was like, okay, there's one other thing that we can run. And she was like, let's run it. And this is what we found. Kiddo's got a lot of mold in his system. Lots of mold in his system. Water damage house. When I brought up the conversation of mold, Mom looked at me like with eyebrows going up, saying, yeah, our house floods every year, and I can see black specks on our windowsill. And in my mind, I'm over here like, crap. Because mold it's a trigger that gets so many people, but it can be a bugger to deal with. But ultimately, for the health of all of us, mold can be a big one. I would say if you have mold in your system, and you want to get better, it's like trying to dry off in the shower while the water's still running. So long as you're still in the mold, your body has a tough time healing. Now, I gave him some things to support as they're working through the house, and this is still an ongoing process, but Mom even updated us, hey, he's starting to grow some peach fuzz back on his head, which is awesome. It's a great stepping stone for him. But again, we need to begin testing the body to know what's going on inside, right? So that is a few stories that we have. Now, question that I always like to pose to people as a thought experiment here is I always ask the question, what does this plant need? We see this plant wilted over. What does this plant need? A lot of people will say water, sunlight, maybe some fertilizer, maybe. Why didn't you guys say an herb though? Why didn't you say a surgery or a medication? Right? Because we know exactly what to do for a wilted over plant. But when it comes to our health, we always ask the question, well, what can I take for this or that? As opposed to asking, well, why did this happen in the first place? Right? It's that different perspective that we always come from. So what are some action steps today, guys? Get tested. Get your labs done. Excuse me. You ultimately don't know what you don't know. Getting a vitamin D level checked. Getting your getting your gut checked. Figuring out if there's any stressors, any food allergies. Positive ANAs signifying some autoimmune process with systemic inflammation from that lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or your thyroid antibodies are all a great starting point for you to begin healing, because you don't know what could be triggering your body, right? Now, there might be 4 questions that you have in your mind here, and I'm going to see if I can answer some of them. What's wrong with me? Can you help me? How long is it going to take, and how much is it going to cost, right? Now, first three questions I cannot really answer until I see your labs. Everybody's different. Everyone heals at different rates. And quite frankly, I'm not going to be over here being able to say you'll heal this amount of days or this many days. Everything's based off of labs, where your body's at, and how much work we need to do. How much is it going to cost, though? So here's where I'm at with you guys. So as a thank you for hopping on and joining this webinar here, and as a thank you for spending, 36 minutes with me so far, I want to give you a little discount here. So for $435 consult, we're going to be recommending for $99, okay? What this is going to include is a detailed health history that will get sent out to you. If you have any old test results, whether it be something from as basic as just a couple markers, or you have a whole stack full of them, that is something that we love to review. Now, but ultimately what I love doing is let's have a conversation. You have a story that maybe you feel as though you haven't heard before, and I want to hear that so I can really understand where you're at and how we can help. Now, that'll also go through recommendations as well as the future costs, insurance, and things like that, which will all be included in that new patient appointment, okay? Now, here's some next steps here if you guys are interested. This QR code will ultimately give you the way that we can get a hold of you, which basically just scan it. It'll come up with our scheduling link. Just go ahead and get scheduled. It's completely free to schedule. And then depending upon what you want to do further, you'll be able to do accordingly as well. So sign up. Either we'll reach out to you to either answer any additional questions. Either myself or Dr. Tyler are both fantastic, and we'll hear whatever concerns you have, especially if you just want us to kind of get an idea of who you are before we even have to get anything run. This is a great opportunity to learn. If you're ready and you're gung-ho to get scheduled, please just go ahead and get scheduled. And then when you get on the phone with us, say, hey, I'm ready to get scheduled. We'll collect that $99. We'll honor it based off of you coming from this webinar, and we'll go from there. Now, we will be sending you some new patient paperwork if you do choose that route, which will explain more in detail on the phone. If you do want to send us labs, and then we can quickly review them with you on that complimentary call, we can also do that, where you can just send your labs to this webinar, to this email, and then we'll start reviewing them accordingly, and then just put in a little description on the link, wherever, if I'm pointing to the right area, the link up there, saying that was sent labs, and we'll make sure we review them beforehand. So, but guys, thank you so much for taking the time to log on to this and go through it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Otherwise, have a fantastic rest of your day.